Hi, this is D.R.C. Raming Jr., CEO of M Dollars Limited, and this presentation is intended for financial institutions and will answer the question of how Arawak X will allow your institution to create funds from SMEs, which are small and medium enterprises, and see higher returns from those. So, the current finance environment includes many players. Often they perform multiple roles, and those players are banks. Then there are players in wealth management, which is private banking, executive entity, and wealth planning. And then there's asset management, and those include investment funds, smart funds, pension funds, and other types of funds. And then there's insurance. And like I said, oftentimes, one institution will do multiple of these things. So there are some problems and opportunities associated with dealing with small and medium-sized enterprises in the funding market. The first problem is that they're high risk. They have a high failure rate, and that's difficult when you're managing money for your clients. The next thing is oftentimes they have minimal track record. So they're either in Series A or they have no track record and in need of seed funding, which is not something that most funds and institutional investors have an appetite for. The next is, even if you had an appetite for these companies, getting these companies properly structured is really tedious and takes valuable institutional resources. It's a lot of work putting them in the shape that it's needed to get them to a point where you'd feel comfortable putting your money in them. That being said, there are some really great opportunities with startups and SMEs. Some people have some really innovative ideas that with the proper structure could see huge returns. And in fact, as you're well aware of, the majority of the value is created at the beginning of a company. And those early stage investors are really the ones that see the most value gained. And like I said, there's some really great ideas with a lot of potential for high return. In fact, at the Small Business Development Center, the SBDC, there's some 4,500 registered companies, and many of them have growth potentials of more than 10 times and return potentials of more than 10 times. So the fact is that 7 out of 10 businesses fail. So in that kind of environment, how would you make a return? And what you do is, it's too risky when you're dealing with companies like this to own the whole business, because if you do so, then you would take 100% of the risk. And so a strategy that venture capitalists use to mitigate this risk is by diversifying that investment across multiple companies. So, for example, you're starting with $100,000. If you broke it into $10,000 investments and put it into 10 different companies that are properly structured and have a good chance of success, what you'd find is that even if 7 return nothing, they failed. 2 of them, 5 times returns, so you got 5 times the money out, and 1 of them return 10 times, you'd find that when you do the math, in aggregate, you'd have doubled your money. So, like I say, if with a strategy like this, even with such a high failure rate, you can still see some really great returns. So, the current funding environment for small and medium enterprises seeking capital goes like this. So companies that have collateral, or individuals that have collateral, go to banks expecting that they'll be funded. And because of the risk associated with that company or the lack of cash flows from the previous years or other factors, 85% of those businesses are rejected, and that's an IDB statistic. So the really savvy companies, they go try their hand at private equity. And private equity is really for companies that are trying to raise capital that's higher than the collateral that they have. And so funding usually about the 50K to 3 mil. And the issues are there is that, even if have a great idea, it's still a who you know kind of world. Also, the truth is, most of these small and medium-sized enterprises are not structured properly enough where private equity would feel comfortable investing in them. So then there are the institutional investors. And with the institutional investors, a business has to be of a certain size in order for it to make sense for a certain fund to take over the business or to invest in the business. And that's why I put down there the survivors, because the businesses that make it to this point have a multitude of different ways of getting there, but there's definitely no systematic way that businesses get to that point. And so this is the way that we at Arawak look at this, is that you have a bunch of startups, and the analogy we're going to use of a business is the development life cycle of a person. So you have a bunch of these startups that have ideas, have limited structure, have some sales, have these things that have the potential to make great businesses, and there's limited funding over there. Then there's this big hole in the middle. And then you see that there's a bunch of businesses that would be attractive to institutional investors. You could think of them like the high school students. They have consistent sales, professional structure. That's where mergers and acquisitions happen, Series B funding, CED, so all later stage funding. And then you have adult businesses where sales are really stable. You got professional structure, and they're really ideal to take public, and so that some of the funds, the more stable funds, can take advantage of them. And so what we do is we fill that gap, and we fill that gap by taking these companies, these startups that are really innovative with high growth potential. They either have sales or contracts lined up, and by putting on certain structure, more structure in the way so that they can access funding at the 50K to 3 mil. And so we do this through what's called a lead investor. And the lead investor on ArawakX, what that'll allow your institution to do is create a fund with higher returns. Yes, higher risk, but as we said in one of the previous slides, you can mitigate that risk by owning small portions of each in many companies, because not all the companies are going to fail. And so what you would do is you'd put together a fund, you'd be the lead investor in these projects, and you'd buy in a bunch of companies, and then you have a new product to offer to your investors. So what's the advantage of becoming a lead investor? So the way that money is raised, the way that ArawakX platform works, is that a company has to declare a minimum investment. And so once that investment threshold is reached, the raise is deemed successful. And then once it's successful, the raise is released to the business. It's monitored to make sure that they spend the money where they say they're going to spend it. They follow the plan. Now, if the raise is unsuccessful, the money is returned to investors. So the idea behind that is that it limits the lead investor's risk of the business being undercapitalized. So you don't have to worry about putting, $50,000 into $250,000 raise. The guy raises $100,000 and he still can't realize the business because he didn't have the money to hire the staff to do the other things. So we're limiting that risk by having this minimum raise. So why would you want to become a lead investor with us? Lead investor, the way a raise works on Arawak X is there's a private placement round before the public round. So you would have first choice of some pretty awesome new companies that happened before the listing. Also, by becoming a lead investor with us, you'd have a constant stream of pre-vetted, properly structured companies that fit your fund profile. And so what I mean by that is if you put together a fund that mainly deals with the real estate sector, then we would bring real estate deals to you, pre-vetted, properly structured, so that you could see whether or not they make sense. Likewise, if you are in the tourism sector, if you want to put together a tourism fund, we could bring that. Or if you want to do a mix, you could also bring that. So it's up to you. The companies are of a multitude of different areas, and there's some really great investments out there. Another really cool advantage of being a lead investor and working with Arawak X is that the crowd validates the idea once it goes public. And what that does is that protects against a groupthink mentality. So we've all been a part of deals where the group gets together, they evaluate the business plan, they like the team, they like what's happening, they like where the direction it's going. They put all this money and investment in them, they buy the equipment, you spend all this capex, and the project bombs. There's no traction. And what the crowd does is, if the crowd doesn't believe in the idea, the crowd's not going to put that money in. So once the crowd puts that money in, you've automatically proved there's some traction out there. Because if the customers feel that the idea is good enough to put money in, then the idea must be good. So it gives us that next layer of protection out there. And then the final advantage is that you have the ability to exit investments. So there's that we've all been a part of a deal or part of buying a deal with a company where you have bought in and you've extracted the majority of the value out of it, and now it's dead weight sitting on the books and you can't get out of it, and it's not suitable to take to IPO. It's not big enough for that, but it just sits there on the books, and that money really could be used in a more efficient place somewhere else. So with Arawak X and our secondary market, you'll be able to exit investments for any reason, whatever reason, whatever the fund decides. So I want to take a look at a practical example of where this could really improve the lives of people and make a wonderful idea, which was the Grand Bahama Tech Hub, work. So the Grand Bahama Tech Hub makes sense because you got the infrastructure there, you got world-class infrastructure, you got regulation, but the companies didn't come. And the reason the companies didn't come is because, or if they came, they died, was because they didn't have the financing. So these kind of companies fit right in that funding gap. And with the other aspects of the Grand Bahama Tech Hub, the world-class infrastructure, the regulation, and the financing, you'll find a lot more companies will be able to set up shop there. A lot more of these wonderful tech ideas will be able to be realized. Yes, many of them will fail, but then there will be survivors, and the survivors will be of a decent size. And so it's what we do is we allow you to tap into that growth. So become a lead investor, and what you'll find is you'll be able to tap into some of these new, exciting companies.